Good. Hello and a warm welcome to everyone to our webinar, Star Service, helping customers to simulate moving to cloud. I am Tanya from the Global User Groups organization and your host for today. Before I introduce our expert, I would like to ask you to share any questions you have in the chat. We will answer them once the presentation is over. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Falco Grünke, Global Head Premium License Utilization Services from Global License Audit and Compliance at SAP SE. Falco will provide insights on STAR, the SAP S/4HANA Trusted Authorizations Review, a tool and service with which you, as on-premise customers, can simulate and calculate your full usage equivalent requirements for a shift to S/4HANA. And with this, Falco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and also warm welcome from my side. I'm very happy to present today to you. And as said, we have only a few slides today, which guide you from the initial problem statement through which we want to solve to the principal offerings we have, the tools, the service itself as well, and then we have plenty of time to answer your questions and go into the details. So feel free to use the chat functionality to post them already during the sessions and the slides. So when we are coming to the cloud transformation and the challenge which comes also from a license perspective, when you're moving from the existing ECC world for most of our customers into an S/4HANA offering or a private cloud offering combined with S4, this means that we are digging into a new license world and a different license entitlement. And there is no classical mapping between the ECC users and our new user groups with the user types within the S/4HANA. So there are differences in between, and especially when we're coming then also in the cloud to the full use equivalent as a metric, this will be included here as well. And we wanted to gain transparency to really make sure that everyone understands before he is moving onwards what is the requirement you have when you're signing your new contract. Within the S/4HANA, very unique is here that the user types are only required for the core system functionalities, and any other product is covered via engine licenses. So our service is focusing here on the core itself and trying to identify those users which are using the core or are authorized to use the core and going into the details there. So let me take you on our journey and go a little bit inside of the details of our service and the tool itself. So first, on a theoretical level, what we are doing here with our estimation approach and the mapping is to offer a tool which goes inside of your, or you install it actually within your current ECC or S4 system. And independent what kind of licenses you have today and what kind of user types you have assigned to the users, we are going across all the users which are in the system and doing a mapping based on the authorizations which are assigned to the user. So we're not looking into today's license entitlement. It's really based on the authorizations which are assigned to the users. And based on these authorizations, we will propose a user type which is correlating to the authorizations the user has. So we do have in the S4 world the professional use, the cloud it's the advanced use, we have the functional use, productivity use, and of course also the development use. And this is our first step in the tool and the service. And as soon as we have identified the right user types for your current user population, when you're moving on into the cloud, we could also identify then, based on the factors, the full use equivalent. So all this is happening within your system based on your existing authorization assignment, independent of any today's contractual language or contractual user types. So how are we doing this? I think everyone is aware of potentially of this little overview here. So when you have users in your system, you do have usually assigned profiles or roles, but profiles and roles are pretty often adjusted and customized according to your personal requirements. So it would be a little bit too high level here, and just looking on the standard profiles and roles wouldn't be sufficient. So we have done a step back and looked into the authorization objects. And the authorization objects, I would say, is more or less the lowest level on the authorization assignment. And we have gone into the authorization objects which are assigned to the core and qualified those and looked into those and classified them accordingly. So with our tool, with the node, you're getting alongside a rule set, which is including the authorization objects, which are considered as relevant for our service and for the user types. And each of those objects is classified according to the pricing metrics we have behind. Of course, it is very important that we're not just looking into the objects. We are also differentiating here between the activities. So read-only access, for example, is covered by a productivity use, while, for example, a change or create or star would change the authorization object then into a higher user type. So this is all covered within our objects, and with the objects, for some of them, you have a one-to-one connection to the transactions, but there are also objects which have potentially several transactions and behind. But this rule set is the basis for the whole service and the tooling itself to analyze your users. And with this concept as basis, we have gone through and started to validate. Let's have a first step and look into the authorization object analyzer. So this is the report or tool which is provided via an SAP node. You can see the node here on the deck as well. And the tool gives you the possibility to analyze the users yourself, and analyzing based on the existing license assignment in your SAP system, what kind of use type would be required here. I will quickly go step by step through. So we have a user validation, we have a role validation, and we can go into the details of each user and see also the details per role. So when you're accessing the authorization object analyzer, you have the possibility to either go into the user validation or the role validation. We are starting here in our example with the role validation. With the user validation, we go into the rule set, choosing the rule set, and then we can start the exercise. If you're not maintaining anything here, it will go through all users. We usually recommend to go especially through the dialog users. And if you have chosen all dialog users, automatically you will get the result for all of your users. As a result, you can see that on the second screen, you will get an overview of your users as they are classified today by yourself in the system, as well as the assessment, what would it mean in the new world. And so here you can see on one hand which user type the people had former, or the users had before in the old world, and what would that mean in the new world. By clicking on the numbers, you can get always a user list of the users, which is available to go more in details. But very important is, especially when you have bigger systems, that you're not just looking into single users, you can also look into the roles and the profiles. With the role validation, you can either jump directly from the users into the roles which are assigned to those users, or you start from the top and going directly in the role analysis. With the role analysis, you get the roles with their assigned user type and a couple of more details on top, how many users are assigned to a role, how many objects have been classified accordingly, and to dig into the roles and identify those which you want to look into, as they might make the big impact and might need some adjustments. When you're clicking on a role or user itself, you will get an overview of all the details in the role, which objects with which activity have been assigned to this role and how they have been classified. And with these details, you can then identify roles which might require adjustments or are driving the user classification for your users. When you're looking into the SAP node to download it to your ECC or your S4 system, you will find as an attachment the rule set itself, which is available for downloading, as well as a little manual which allows you to go step by step through the process here, and all the functions and details are described in there. Further, you can run the tool several times. You will see versions. So with the previous executions, you will find all your executions and the differences you had between the versions. And last but not least, you can export the results as well into Excel. The result can be exported for your own purposes directly and readable. If you're going later on into the service, the star service, which we will describe in a second, then you can choose the option export results for SAP, which will then encrypt the usernames, etc., so that the user details are not transferred into SAP. And this file would be then the basis for the star service if you're going through one. Nevertheless, all this here is part of the node and can be totally done independent without any SAP involvement. Looking now into the process of the star service. So if the initial result is for you surprising, or you want to have support from SAP to dig deeper and run simulations and optimizing, we are offering the star service. For the star service, of course, there's a preparation required, like installing the node. And as soon as we discuss the approach, also transferring the data I've just mentioned. And then our experts, together with your experts, are driving an as-is analysis, looking into the numbers we have just seen, analyzing the roles with the highest impact, and also verifying potential engine use scenarios. From there, we are going then into a kind of in simulation runs, which means that we would run then simulations where we are describing or excluding specific objects from roles in case those are considered as non-relevant or assigned by mistake, and seeing then the differences and what does that mean for your user base from a license perspective. And we are trying to run several simulations here to come from the initial result to a totally optimized result with several steps in between. And the results will be then presented afterwards in a report. And you can analyze them together with your business, whether those roles need to be adjusted or can be adjusted, or if we have to remain with the initial as-is status. So whether those objects are really required by the business, or if they can be eliminated or minimized to a smaller user group. So we are going through here the majority of the roles, but especially those who have a high impact, and trying to minimize with small adjustments the FUE requirement. And as stated here, it is a technical approach. So we are coming definitely from a pure technical analysis, which means that we are looking into the profiles and the roles itself, and to see where do we have big differences between the classification and the assigned objects. So if it is only a minor part of the role which has an impact for higher classification, then potentially those would be the ones we are looking in to identify optimization potentials. But as said, this would be definitely required to be reviewed with the business to make sure that there is no disruption of the business before change. That's why we are running simulations which have no impact while we are running those on the system. The simulations itself, unfortunately, can not be executed with the provided node so far, because the provided node is going in your actual data of the users, but with the generation of the files, which I've mentioned, this can be done outside of your system with analysis tools. The whole service itself will be summarized in a service report with all the analysis and all the steps which have been done for the optimization, and will be handed over to you as final result of the service, which gives you then the transparency before your transaction or before measurement is coming up. So a little bit around the service on top. So the service is available for all our customers and is included in your maintenance costs. So there's no additional charge for this service, and you can request it via the SAP support portal. We will later on also put the link into our chat. And if you're going into there, you can request the service with a couple of questions around your current status. Then it is important to install the node itself also. This can be done either upfront or afterwards. And then our experts are looking together with you in the results, discussing your requirements and adjusting the service offering according to your specific situation, and providing you with a final result which can be used as a baseline for any future decisions on your license entitlement. As said, the service is available in the support portal, and usually our team is reaching out to you a couple of days after the request came in. It always depends on the number of engagements which are currently requested. And with this, Tanya, I'm a little bit ahead of time, but it's great that we have a bit more chance then to go through the questions and looking into the details, because usually the specific situations are those which are the most interesting one. So yeah, Tanya, let's have a look into the questions in the chat and see whether we have an answer for them.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Absolutely happy to. We have a question. Let me come back to it. So the question is, what is the core difference in authorization scheme between an ECC system 7.5 with a HANA database on premise and S/4HANA on cloud? I cannot get the gain.
Yeah, from a technical perspective on the authorization objects, there is no real difference between the systems. The authorization objects are the same. We are talking here about the difference from the license model. So when you have a classical ECC license model, as seen on the page with professional use, worker use, logistic use, those have different user descriptions than we do have in the S4 use types. So if you're moving into the new contractual world, From a technical perspective, it might not have an impact, but from a license perspective, this is where the difference lies.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is, when a user ends up with no classification, does that mean that there is no user classification linked to the role he has?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of authorizations which are outside of the core. So there might be a requirement of other license types. When we're looking into the core, our rule set is going into the majority of the objects which are assigned to the core. We do have excluded a couple of cross objects. So I would say there's always a license requirement, but most likely there is no user type requirement. It might be an engine license which is required then for those users.
Perfect, thank you very much. So far, we don't have any further questions in the chat, but we do have questions from the user groups that have been sent to me beforehand. So, for example, where do we find the rule set?
The rule set is attached to the node. So if you're accessing the node, you will find the tab attachments, and there you will find the rule set as well as the manual for the node itself.
Great, thank you. And then another question is, can the report also be executed on S/4HANA systems, or is it only possible on ECC?
It is possible on both. And if you are today already in an S4 system, you can execute it. If you are already on a license model for S4 and you're just using it, let's say upfront your measurement, for example, to verify your user classification, you have also an additional opportunity to use the role-based user classification, which means that you can classify the roles and all users will be classified according to their role assignment. And there's an opportunity out of the node to transfer the role classification. If you are saying it is accurate, then you can transfer it into your system and use it as basis for your measurements.
Thank you. And another question, can we do all on our own as customers? And what are you doing as SAP in this service?
Yeah, so the tool itself, the node, is available for everyone and for all our customers, and you can definitely do the as-is analysis on your own. When it comes to simulations, this is currently not possible with the node from a technical perspective. So what we would do as SAP is going into the simulations, excluding specific objects, etc., based on the discussion with you. So the as-is analysis can be done by everyone, and if this is sufficient for you, you can proceed from there. If you want to have simulations and an expert view also from the colleagues who are doing this on a day-to-day basis, then this is what we are offering in the service, as well as at the end a documentation of the agreed steps and the agreed numbers.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from the chat. So following up from my previous question, how would you check if a user license could be covered by an engine license instead of a user license?
So for the engines, we have included indicators. This is not yet fully up and running for 100% of our engines, but the big engines are already covered. So for engines, we have indicator objects included, which are only accessed by specific engines and not by core functionalities to highlight those users separately.
I hope this answers your question, Nile. And in the meantime, I will continue with the questions collected from the SAP user group members. So when we send SAP our data, is it anonymized?
It is, as said, there are two functionalities. One is for your own download, where it is still visible. If you're creating the file for SAP, all the username and details will be hashed.
Great, thank you. And what do we get as a result of the service?
So the final result of the service is a report which is highlighting the initial as-is analysis plus the optimizations we have done, and also the impact of each optimization step, which is called then simulation by simulation. So at the end, you will have the result from the very beginning to the total optimized one from a technical perspective, and the steps in between. And from there, you can then take the decision together with the business which objects can be excluded, and you have the transparency, what that means from a license impact perspective.
Perfect, thank you very much. And then the last questions I have received is, when we have several systems, is the data then also consolidated?
Yeah, we do a consolidation. So this is currently, unfortunately, also with the node, not yet possible to do on your own. But if you're going into the star service, we will consolidate the data based on the typical criteria like username, and doing an analysis then across all the systems. So we will optimize system by system, and afterwards then also doing a consolidation, one time for the as-is and for the final result as well.
Thank you very much. That is the last questions I have received from the SV user groups. In the chat, I cannot find any new question. So for the time being, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me anytime. No problems if any new questions come up. You also have the opportunity to join Falco another time. On September 6th, it's a different time. This time it's 10 a.m. CEST. I have just posted the link in the chat. And if there are no further questions, then I would like to thank Falco very much for your wonderful and excellent presentation, for providing the insights on our new service. And of course, last but not least, all our attendees for joining and for asking your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya, and thank you everyone for joining.
So, and with this, I will end the stream.